welcome U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Rashad Hussain.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to be with you. It's an honor to be here at the summit, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to address so many friends, so many colleagues and partners from around the world who are committed to advancing and protecting freedom of religion. Before I began working in public service, and particularly as a student, I should say, I always felt a strong sense of obligation to engage with our government representatives every time I could get the chance to do so, to seek ways to advance justice, to seek ways to advance peace around the world. And I know that many of you feel the same way. And so now that I am in government, I take very seriously the opportunity that we have to work closely together and to advance our highest principles through our shared efforts. I want to take a moment to thank bipartisan co-chairs, former Ambassador Sam Brownback and Dr. Katrina Lantos-Sweat for organizing this year's IRF Summit. And in particular, I want to acknowledge their long-standing and steadfast commitment to international efforts to promote freedom of religion or belief. Bipartisan support is critical to the work of the IRF Summit and the Office of International Religious Freedom, which also enjoys cooperation with such a broad range of civil society from all faith groups and from all backgrounds. Our country's great religious diversity is also reflected in our office's leadership. I believe it sends a very powerful signal all around the world that the last 4 ambassadors with the mission of protecting international religious freedom have been an African-American Protestant minister, a Jewish rabbi, a Catholic politician, and now a Muslim. And the fact that we continue to work together, to work closely together, speaks to the nonpartisan and enduring commitment that we have to promote the freedom of religion all over the world. In the 5 months since I've taken on my responsibilities, many people have asked me an important question that I would like to answer as a way to frame my remarks today. And that question is, who are you? Who are you as the United States to assess or to stand in judgment of religious freedom and human rights around the world? And I believe that we are uniquely situated to stand up for religious freedom around the world for a number of reasons. First of all, we are ourselves a country founded on religious freedom, and we're founded by many individuals who are fleeing religious persecution themselves. Second, our Constitution's Bill of Rights begins with the protection of human rights, including the critical right of religious freedom. And third, we are a country of immigrants. People come here from all around the world and demand that their elected representatives and government officials promote our values in their homelands. They would have it no other way. And I can speak to this through the experience of my own dinner table conversations I had as a young child growing up in Texas. My parents came to the United States from India. My father grew up in a village in India with no electricity, in fact. And we were a patriotic family, and my parents, at the same time, never forgot their homeland. And they never forgot their obligation to speak up to help people there. And so who are we to stand up for religious freedom around the world? In many ways, we are representatives of the rest of the world gathered here in the United States. And we are also a people that doesn't shy away from discussing our own efforts to seek a more perfect union. We persist in this work because of the unfortunate truth that many of the challenges to freedom of religion or belief that we see in the world today, both at home and abroad, are structural, systemic, and deeply entrenched. These challenges demand sustained commitment from all of us who are unwilling to accept hatred, intolerance, and persecution as the status quo. What is the United States then doing to promote and protect international religious freedom? In the past 5 months, our team has used a multi-pronged strategy. Starting with the very basics, we've had the opportunity to brief U.S. ambassadors getting ready to take on their assignments, raising religious freedom issues in their respective countries where they will be serving, and arming them with ideas about how to address the challenges on the ground. We meet regularly with foreign government officials based here, and we meet regularly with them abroad, urging social and legal reform and advocating for victims of religious freedom violations, and that includes raising the cases of individuals who are being persecuted. On a daily basis, I confer with civil society groups, including many of you who are here today, who not only partner with us in this effort, but who also challenge me and challenge our government to do better. I can tell you with confidence that almost every time I walk out of one of these meetings with our civil society partners, I'm in complete agreement about the issues that they raise, that we need to make sure that we are protecting those people that they spoke to me about. And then the challenge becomes working together to figure out the best ways as a government in partnership with civil society in order to come up with the best, smartest, and most effective solutions. My colleagues and I have supported your international efforts, which are critical to protecting religious freedom around the world. The State Department also funds $20 million in programs annually to ensure all individuals enjoy full participation in society without discrimination based on belief or non-belief. On June 2nd, just earlier this month, we released a 2021 International Religious Freedom Report, and I'd like to share a few of the key themes from the report. First, governments continue to use discriminatory laws and policies to abuse their own people. Second, increasing social intolerance and hatred fuel violence and conflict around the world. And third, effective collaboration among governments, multilateral partners, and civil society, many who are in this room right now, has led to positive change and provides hope in addressing these complex challenges. Let me provide concrete examples of how these themes are playing out around the world. First, far too many governments remain undeterred in their repression of their citizens. It is not surprising that the People's Republic of China is a glaring example here. The PRC government continues to commit genocide and crimes against humanity against Uyghurs who are predominantly Muslim and members of other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang. The PRC increasingly uses sophisticated emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and facial recognition to conduct surveillance and maintain control of its open-air prison in Xinjiang. Behind all of the evidence, behind all of the data, and the many reports of death in custody, torture, and physical abuse, there are thousands of Uyghur family members, daughters, and sons who are desperate to know where their parents are, but are terrified of knowing what news they could discover, and they are wondering if they will ever be safely reunited with their family. The PRC government also continues its severe crackdown on Tibetan Buddhists. Authorities arrested, tortured, and committed other human rights abuses against Tibetans who promoted their language and culture, or possessed pictures and writings of the Dalai Lama, or practiced their religion at Buddhist monasteries. The PRC has also actively interfered in the selection of Tibetan Buddhist lamas. To be clear, these policies constitute the PRC's deliberate effort to sinicize and suppress Tibet's distinct religious, cultural, and linguistic traditions. Secretary Blinken also recently determined that members of the Burmese military committed genocide and crimes against humanity against Rohingya. Throughout Burma, already vulnerable communities, including civil society leaders, human rights advocates, and members of religious and ethnic minority groups continue to face heightened risk of atrocities and other abuses. I traveled to Cox's Bazar in April, where we met with Rohingya, which include Muslims, Christians, and Hindus, and others, to advocate for their right to continue to pursue education and other opportunities essential to their livelihood. Following its first-time designation as a country of particular concern last year, Russia has doubled down on its violations of religious freedom rather than reverse course. Russian courts regularly reach new milestones for excessive prison sentences against individuals exercising their religious freedom, and Russian authorities carry out hundreds of home raids against suspected extremists that frequently include violence. President Putin sought to justify the unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine through the blatantly false pretext of denazification. The world clearly sees through this lie and is instead witnessing Russia's brutal suppression, including suppression of religious leaders and the appalling destruction of religious sites. In Nigeria, several state governments use anti-defamation and blasphemy laws to punish people for expressing their beliefs, and mob violence against accused blasphemers represent some of the most severe violations of religious freedom and belief in that country. Recently, a humanist activist was sentenced to 24 years in prison after being charged with making blasphemous statements on his personal Facebook account. And just last month, a young woman was brutally attacked and killed by fellow students at her college, reportedly for making blasphemous statements against Islam. Soon my office will launch a social media campaign to highlight global blasphemy and apostasy cases. The campaign will put pressure on violators of religious freedom by spotlighting victims of discriminatory laws and practices. Religious freedom conditions in Afghanistan have deteriorated since the Taliban takeover of Kabul. The Taliban and rival militant group ISIS-K have detained, intimidated, threatened, and attacked members of religious minority communities there. To elaborate a little bit further on the report's second theme, there are a number of ways that rising societal intolerance and hatred are fueling violence and conflict around the world. Governments must speak out and protect the vulnerable and the marginalized. Anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred, and xenophobia are on the rise in many countries. Democratic backsliding and the rise of nationalism in nativist rhetorics and policies have been used to justify violence towards members of ethnic or religious minority groups and historically marginalized peoples. Social media platforms are used to spread hate speech and to incite violence by vilifying and threatening members of religious minorities. In India, we are concerned with the situation of a number of communities, including Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Dalits, indigenous communities, and others. As Secretary Blinken said recently, we regularly engage with our Indian counterparts, and we are monitoring recent concerning developments in India, including human rights abuses by some government, police, and prison officers. The U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, as part of its early warning project, recently listed India as second on its list of countries with potential for mass killings. Civil society organizations around the world have highlighted India's citizenship laws, open calls for genocide, attacks on churches, demolition of homes, and dehumanizing language from government officials, including one minister who referred to Muslims as termites. And we, of course, condemn attacks against all communities and individuals, including the terrible murder of a Hindu tailor yesterday in India. And finally, I'd like to say more about the report's third theme, how collaboration between civil society and government has created progress. While the report that we released paints a challenging picture about the state of religious freedom around the world, we do remain hopeful about the future. Civil society groups such as yourselves continue to work in countries all over the world and are essential to the work that we do. Their advocacy changes laws. It uplifts the names of prisoners. It provides lawyers to fight against spurious charges, and it pushes governments, including our own government, to do the right thing. I've been fortunate to work with civil society to support powerful initiatives, such as the Marrakesh Declaration, which affirms the rights of Christians and other religious minorities in Muslim-majority countries. We've also worked on the Istanbul process, which rejects blasphemy laws and the criminalization of speech. I'd like to take a moment today to remember several people who fought for the rights of all in their countries who we have lost in the last year. Asher Sargon Eskria, president of the Assyrian Aid Society and a champion of the Assyrian Christian minority in Iraq. He was among those who sheltered refugees and survivors of ISIS's genocide, including Christians, Yazidis, and Shia, and later helped rebuild the Nineveh plains. He was a tireless advocate for Christians and religious minorities in Iraq. And he spent his lifetime defending his faith, his people, and his country in some of the most difficult circumstances imaginable. In war after war and in tragedy after tragedy, Asher was there on the ground, often under fire, helping those in need, both Assyrians and non-Assyrians alike. This year we also lost Father Stan Swami, a Jesuit priest and tireless advocate for the human rights of members of disadvantaged communities, including religious minorities and tribal communities. He died in Indian custody under charges of Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. In February 2022, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention released an opinion declaring Swami's detention arbitrary and his death as utterly preventable. Our condolences go out to Father Swami's family and all those with whom he worked and mentored to make the world a more just place for all of us. And in September of last year, Rohingya Muslim advocate and community leader Mohibullah was murdered in Bangladesh. Mohibullah was a brave and fierce advocate for the human rights of Rohingya Muslims around the world. Many of you met him when he traveled to the United States to speak at the Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom in 2019. And we honor his work by continuing to advocate for Rohingya and to lift up voices of members of the community in decisions about their own future. Our job, simply put, would be impossible without the vital work of all of you, without civil society organizations. Governments must listen to and empower the voices of civil society. There is no change possible without the hard work of those fighting for those rights, including participants in the summit today. Civil society's brave members provide the compassion, the vigilance, and insight drawn from experience to hold governments and communities accountable for the way they treat individuals based on their religion or their belief. The great work of civil society organizations like Amnesty International, Boat People SOS, Open Doors, Hindus for Human Rights, the Uyghur Human Rights Project, the Religious Freedom Institute, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA, and Humanist International, just to name a few, has been absolutely critical globally. As part of our collaboration for good, I applaud the summit's inauguration of a civil society congress to develop innovative ideas to reverse negative trends in the right of freedom of thought, conscience, and religion by presenting proposals in front of fellow advocates and a listening panel of government representatives. We look forward to seeing the final report. Independent and strong civil societies help governments solve problems and better serve their people by shining a light on the issues that matter the most. Where civil society thrives, governments operate with more transparency and accountability, creating a tangible impact in the lives of everyday citizens. We must listen to and we must empower the voices of civil society, including those who dissent from majority views or criticize the government, as we work towards a more just and peaceful future for all of us. We'll continue to work closely with civil society organizations to counter all forms of hatred, violence, and discrimination around the world. Your expertise, your advocacy, your commitment, and your passion move people and move governments, including ours. Change is only possible with the hard work of the groups and individuals dedicated to fighting for all of these rights. And today, more than ever, we have tools at our disposal to facilitate the flow of information, to keep everyone informed. We have mechanisms to shed light on abuses taking place, and we have the means to hold bad actors accountable. We have more partners in this effort now than ever before, including religious leaders. Religion can be such a powerful force for good, and it should never be used to harm people. Our greatest hope is that together we can unite our efforts to ensure respect for freedom of religion or belief for all people around the globe, and we continue to stand in solidarity with all people seeking to exercise their beliefs. Thank you so much.